Welcome to Nomad Media, where we tell automotive stories, a little bit of history, and some unique personal experiences. Let's get right into it. So today we have Joey Whitlow in his 1970 Datsun Fairlady 240Z. Joey, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, and I can't wait to hear the stories behind this car. So what can you tell me about it? And let's get right into some of the history of it, and then what can you tell me about your ownership of it?
So the history on the 240Z was it was built in Japan for the American public. So it's a little bit of a bigger car. It's more of a grand tour car than most Japanese cars back then. It replaced the Fairlady Z, and that was pretty much why it was built. They needed a car to bring to here to get into the sports car market. So.
And anybody that's interested in like old Japanese cars as well, they might know things like the Honda, what is it, S600
Yep.
or S660.
Yep.
Those are really tiny cars.
They're
like,
very small.
They are tiny compared to this even. Like this is a much bigger car and it's more of a sports car as well. So where the 600 was a little boxy looking thing, you know, so it's like,
Yeah.
that's a good little tidbit there. And I didn't actually know that because I figured the 240 was built for the Japanese market first, which is what most Japanese companies of this era were for.
Right.
Like things like, I know one thing that stands out to me all the time is the front side mirrors.
Right.
Like not many cars in America have that.
Right.
Like, so. But that's interesting, man. But what can you tell me about your ownership of it?
So I got the car in 08 or 09, I don't remember exactly, but drug it out of a barn, literally. Second owner, the original guy, had backed into a trailer, busted tail light. So he parked it to fix it, and it's the same old story of I'll fix it one day. So parked in the 80s, and then in 09 I drag it out and buy it to fix it. So it just got forgot about and put back over the years. We trailered it home because it was buried that deep in barn dirt and hay and everything else, and we drug it home, threw some gas in it, put a fuel pump on it, and it fired straight up and drove it down the road.
And see, that's kind of the thing with Japanese cars too. Like it's amazing that it would fire up at all after that condition, but now that it fires up just because you threw some gas in it and you know cleaned out a little bit on it. I don't know that, like, I don't know as much to say that, but that's the mindset that I have of Japanese cars. So I shouldn't say that that's a guarantee with all of them, but you know, just
it tends to be the thing. That was part of what made these so popular back, in the 70s. My dad actually had one, and it was, you'd have all your friends with Camaros and Mustangs, and that may or may not crank sometimes. The typical old car stuff. But the 240s would fire up every time.
Yeah.
All the old Hondas, all the old Nissans and Datsuns, that was the whole purpose, was reliability plus you get a sports car.
Yeah, and I actually know from the Honda standpoint that's what they focus on, is the reliability side of it. So like I'm not sure what the Nissan side is, but hey, I'm glad they made these cars because these are some cool cars.
Yeah.
But, so you were mentioning that this car to you and your dad owned one. Like, so what makes this car the special car for you other than your dad owning one? Like,
well, it's pretty cool that he actually had a blue one. You can hear him tell stories about driving it down to pick it up in South Alabama, Florida, and then driving it back when he's 14. He shouldn't have been driving, but he did. But this would just being one of the first cars you see. There's nothing else really that looks like them. The long nose, the short back, the slanted roof, and compared to 69, 70 model American cars, being a kid, this was a whole nother world. It just looks different. It sounds different. It drives different. It's made to be a tour. It's made to be dependable. It's made, it just once you have the fever and you've ridden in one or drove one, it doesn't go away. So,
so with that there,
okay, this is the car for me. I mean, this is what started the hobby. This is what got me interested in turning wrenches. It's what got me interested in fixing it. You know, we used to drive it out on some back country roads in Danville, and at the time I'd put a welded diff in it, and it had became a quote unquote drift car because, you know, an old car that can rev 7,000 RPM and it doesn't weigh anything and can slide is fantastic. I mean, manual steering, that kind of stuff. So it's built, it's set up to be basically what you would think a drift car, race car is. So.
And I'm pretty sure this has a e-brake too. So
It
it's
does.
like you've got
Yeah.
all the essentials right
Yes.
there for a drift car.
I mean, you know, most cars don't have an e-brake, so it's, you know, you can dump a clutch, you can grab an e-brake, it can rev for days.
Yeah.
But then we pulled the rear end out and welded it up, and then it for sure slides for days, especially with some cheap tires I had on it back then. So,
Well, cheap tires are the way to go when
Yeah.
you're not doing it like.
Right.
So I've talked to you a little bit on this, but you said you've never been to Mid-Pond in this car.
no.
So just to mention, you know, I know that some people out there may know what Mid-Pond is, which is a drift course and things like a drift track. And but you know, if you go to Mid-Pond, you've probably got a little bit more. Like I've never personally been. I have friends that go. There's probably a little bit more on your safety side, and you
Yeah.
can't have this or that.
Yeah.
So, like, but if you're out just kind of drifting around Danville,
Yeah.
considering I'm from there, it's
Yeah.
like, hey, it's like if you're just drifting around Danville, it's like, yeah, throw the junk tires on, let's go burn them.
Yeah. You know, this thing was, you hear about it in the Japanese stories of drifting, but all the mountainy roads out towards Danville, once you get out into the forest, that's what this thing would do. I mean, that's what I used it for.
Mm-hmm.
And it would sit for 6 months until I'd get to go drive it again, and then I'd crank it and then go tear it up and then park it again for 6 months, and then just in between. I mean, you know, for a long time we lived out of state, and that's what we used it for. It was just to come home and relieve some stress and have fun.
I hear you, man. That's what owning one of these types of cars is all about. Like
Yeah.
using it and having fun with it. Now you've owned it for a while.
Right.
I can't imagine anyone that would just go out and buy this car doing that, but
Yeah.
boy should they.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's what it's for.
yeah, that's what it's for. Use the car the way
Yeah.
you see would be important, or like what it's meant for. Like
Right.
that's how you have fun in cars.
Right.
You know. So you said that you pulled this out of a barn as well, man. Like, like we know that you had to do a little bit to get it running.
Right.
What all did you have to do in terms of like, was there body work on it, like restoration wise? What happened there with you? Because obviously you still have it.
Right.
So
Right. The first time, the normal Datsun issues, me and my brother semi-sanded it. He sprayed a quick coat of paint on it to stop it from rusting. We were trying to save it because it was so far on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how we left it for 7 or 8 years. We started this restoration 3 years ago. My dad did all the body work. My brother repainted it again, this time a real paint job. But the first one was just to save it because it was so far gone. And the second one was to save it for my son, so that he'll actually be able to drive it. He'll be able to have it. This was the next 50 year save. The first one was just hang on until I can get you fixed.
Yeah. So that's a good thing right there, man. Like you didn't do a full restoration is what it sounds like the first time.
No.
Just kind of, hey, make sure it survives.
Yeah.
You know, just to reiterate a little bit.
Well,
But
we were rough on it. It needed to have flaws. The car has to have flaws for you to like it. It's got to have a personality. It's got to have something going on. You know, if they're perfect, they're not fun, and if they're too bad, they're not great. So there's got to be some medium. Your best friends are usually the ones who have a little quirk. Your car needs to have a quirk. So
yeah,
that's what we were going for.
Definitely,
So.
And it's a quirky car,
Yeah.
whether you had the quirk or not.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned about everybody in their Camaros and their
Yeah.
Mustangs or whatever they had back
Yeah.
in the day. It's like you have the Nissan.
Yeah.
I have a
Right.
Nissan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it took a lot for somebody back in '70 to spend the money on one of these when you could have a Camaro.
Yeah.
I mean,
And the engine in these, I think, is an inline six, right?
inline six, 2.4 liter.
So you're also choosing to have an inline six over a V8, a ground thumping V8.
Right.
So
right.
it's like you're making that conscious choice,
Right.
and a lot of people probably wouldn't.
Right, and then, you know, on paper, when you look at it, 160 horsepower versus what a Chevelle or anything else had doesn't seem like a lot, but these weigh 2,000 pounds versus what a Chevelle did. So 160 is more than enough for what it needed
Oh yeah.
to get going. So
Well, that's the difference between a Japanese engineer's thought process and an American engineer's thought process.
Yeah.
Bigger's always better in America,
Right.
and then in Japan is always like just enough.
Right. And you know, these are overhead cam engines, and like I said, they rev like a new car. I mean, I'd have no issue turning 7,000 in this right now.
7,000, 8,000, 9,000.
It'll do it all day, and it sounds fantastic when it's up that high. So it kind of it does what normal inline sixes do. Every gear change, it kind of like yells back at you and it growls, and it, you know, it's fighting you to do it, but it becomes addictive, and you get a lot of stares in traffic when you do a gear change and it's popping and loud. So
there's a reason there's a following for these vehicles,
Yes.
man, and it's like the stuff like that, the quirkiness of it.
Yeah.
That is probably it. Like I don't know because I'm on the American side,
Right.
but like you know, that is probably it. I just think the car is just cool. Like
Yeah.
the cool is a staple of cool cars
Yeah.
in my book. So, but
yeah, it's definitely one of the ones that every time we've taken it out, every time I get gas, every time you go, you end up at a gas station listening to somebody for 30 minutes because they want to tell you about they met their wife in this car. This was their first car. Their dad had one. Their uncle had one. They wrapped it around a tree. It's a story car. I mean, I guess all cars are, but these tend to be, from my experience, more so because everybody knew someone who had one, kind of deal. And not as many of them survive, so you don't see them as much as everything else.
so where's your story like that? Because you were mentioning you drive this all the time now.
Yeah,
Like you've
I
owned
do.
it for what, 14
14
years,
years, yeah.
something like that. So it's like, where's your story like that? Are you going to be that guy at the gas station someday?
Oh, for sure. I've had this thing in a ditch. Like I didn't.
Wait a minute. What, you didn't tell me about that. What happened with this ditch?
Every drift was not perfect. Some were overshot, and but in fairness to the
To the
Datsun,
ditch, it was in the right spot.
it wasn't a big ditch, and the Datsun powered through, and it kept on going. And then you spray the mud off, and nobody knows whatever happened. So, multiple times. I mean, I've ripped the tire open because it hung on an exhaust hanger because it was sideways too much, and the exhaust rattled. And it's taken a beating, it always comes back. I mean, so in all honesty, the fact that my dad and brother were able to make it look this good after all of what I've given this thing is a miracle in itself. So it's
It's a testament to their skills.
yes, it is. It's a testament to theirs and how abusive I am to these things. So yeah. It's great, man. I mean, you know, long-term goal is the restoration was to let it last long enough so that, you know, when my son gets old enough, he can have it. He can take the thing, he can drive it, and hopefully it does for him what it did for me. I hope he remembers this as like his first reason to get into cars. And
what would you want your son to know if he ever looked back on this video someday? Like, what would you want him to know about that? Like, why is this car special to Dad? Like, what would you want him to do with it? Would you want, like, I know some people are like, I don't want my car sitting in a garage.
yeah,
And then, like, think about some of the classic cars that just recently sold, just to put a date on this, like the Black Ghost Challenger that just sold at Mecum, where the guy, when he was passing away, he told his son, don't give away my car. Well,
yeah.
you know.
Don't give away my car. I mean, you know, by the time he inherits it, you know, I mean, right now it's 50. It's a little over 50 years old. So by the time he gets it, you know, the car will be 70, but no matter what chaos you throw at it, it'll be fine. It's going to be okay. Like, it'll make it. It'll be great. I would prefer him to drive it the way I drove it.
Have fun with it.
That's what it's for. Drive it. Like, it should scare you a little. You should get on it hard enough in a corner that it slips, and then you get white-knuckled and you kind of check yourself. That's what the car's made to do. Like, have fun in the thing. Like, you know, treat it like it should be treated. It's a lightweight old Japanese race car. That's what they act like. So.
And that's the reason why car guys today are not the same as car guys in the past.
Yeah.
Because car guys today are, in my opinion, scared to do anything in their cars.
Yeah.
So, Joey, let's get to hearing this thing idle, you know?
All right, sounds good.
So that's Joey Whitlow's 1970 Nissan Fairlady 240Z, which is a mouthful to say, and I'm surprised I've spit it out as many times as I could without messing up.
Right.
But Joey, man, this car is amazing. I love the story of how you've just used and abused this car, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But clearly, it's still in good shape. It holds up, and a lot of people don't understand that you can do this to cars and it's still okay.
Right.
Modern cars, maybe not, but
Right.
these old classic cars, it's like they're built different. They're just built different.
Right.
Thinking about all the old commercials, just about built XYZ OEM tough.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like,
Right.
and I'm sure people are understanding what I'm going for there,
Right.
but it's like, it ain't that way anymore. It's like they'd fall apart if you threw a rock at them. But
Right.
this thing, like, it's awesome. I love to hear that you've used it. I hope your son, whenever he inherits it, uses it to the full extent that you did. And I'd like to thank you just for having me out here to talk about it. Is there anything you would like to say to anybody that might be watching?
Drive your car. I mean, use it for what it's made for. They're way tougher than what you think in your head. You know, you tend to think they're old and they're fragile, but they've made it for the 50, 60 years up until you've owned it. They'll make it for the next 50 or 60, no matter what you do to them realistically. So drive the thing.
Yeah, just have fun with
Yeah.
it. Man, thanks again. I appreciate everything. Like, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And with that, guys, that'll do it for today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
I'll see you at the next car show, okay?
All right, guys, be sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.